Well, all right, y'all. Looks like we can get started. Looks like most of us are here. If I'm missing a person, I mean, we are recording this, so they might miss a little bit of the front, but we can, I can always share it with them later. Um, so yeah, thank you all for coming, hanging out with us on a Friday night, for the first Zoom event of the 2022 year. I believe it's 2022 already. But yeah, this is a Don Fulano tequila. So I was introduced to Don Fulano, uh, officially probably in like 2015, 2016. Just working at the store, they were just super clean tequilas. We had already been working with the brand that Don Fulano is close to in Jalisco, or in tequila, excuse me, with Fortaleza. And it was a brand that was introduced to me like, hey, if you like that stuff, if that's working well for y'all, check out this. And just super impressed with the flavors that they had. Didn't know much about the history at the time, but then when I was lucky enough to go down to tequila in 2017, I got to meet I got to meet a lot of people, but Sergio was one of the individuals we got to meet who was really cool. So Sergio Fonseca, um, who is a really cool guy. He's very relaxed. He learned from his uncle Enrique how to produce tequila. Enrique is a really cool story himself because he was running the family farm as a tequila producer, or as a tequila grower, excuse me, agave grower. Don't grow tequila, agave grower. And then in the 80s, during a shortage of agave, they were given the option of either sell your plants to us on a cheap, or maybe something might happen to your fields or something along those lines. So instead of doing that, they were like, we're going to make our own tequila. So Enrique actually went over to Europe and studied how Scotch producers practiced the art of blending, went over to France to figure out how different oak treatments were done, and found the way he wanted to make their tequila. And then he passed that on to Sergio, and they have just been making these awesome liquid for us for, that'd be about 30 years now, plus around. Um, and yeah, so we're lucky enough because I just have some general information about them, but we are lucky enough to have Sergio Muniz here with us, who is the West Coast brand ambassador. So Sergio, I will let you introduce yourself and let us know anything you want to start out with.
Sure. So, first of all, thank you so much for joining us. I'm super excited to chat with you all, guys. So just a little bit about me. I've been working with tequila for the better part of a decade. Been working with Don Fulano for about 3 years now. Before that, I was actually working with Fortaleza as a part-time brand ambassador, and before that, I bartended in New York and Miami, LA, and now I currently in San Diego. So kind of been around in the hospitality industry and the tequila industry. So if at any point you guys have any questions, not just on tequila, but if you guys want to, talk about mezcal, any other kind of agave distillates, I'm happy to answer any questions you guys might have. So before we get into kind of the process, Jeremy touched a little bit about the history. So Enrique Fonseca and Sergio Mendoza
Recording in progress.
are were the founders of Tequila Don Fulano. See, their family emigrated to a town called Atotonilco. Atotonilco is are in the highlands of Jalisco. It's a small town about 3 hours from the town of Tequila, and they basically started farming crops to supply a storefront that they had opened. So at first, they really started growing just kind of regular crops, corn, sugar, potatoes, grains, and really just started growing agave as a favor to one of their tequila making buddies. I'm not glad this is the late 1800s. This is before really tequila was even exported to the US. But as tequila started to grow, as a market, so did their farm. So they kept buying more land and growing more agave. And Jeremy said it today, we are one of the biggest, if not the biggest supplier of at least blue web agave in Mexico. We supply agave to multiple tequila companies, and obviously, we were able to be one of the last remaining really kind of family-owned tequilas that grow 100% estate grown agave. You see, tequila we see it first and foremost as an agricultural product, right? Your journey begins and ends really with your raw material, which is the agave, the blue web agave. You see, agave takes anywhere between a minimum 6, I would even argue 7, all the way up to 12 years to grow. And I'm not talking about plants that are, miles within each other. We're talking about plants that are right next to each other. You could have two plants inches from each other that could be between 6 months to a year to be ready to be harvested. See, agave is a very complex crop in which it grows very differently based on which side of the hill it is, how much sun exposure it's gotten, the amount of rain that it's been exposed to, the amount of wildlife it's been exposed to. It's very much a product of its environment, and it's very temperamental in that. So in order to kind of properly grow and most importantly harvest agave, you kind of have to know what you're doing. And we're grateful that this family has been doing it for over 140 years. Now, Jeremy touched on a little bit on kind of how we started growing, making tequila. You see, when your raw material, your crop takes, a minimum 6 to 7 years to grow, every 7 years or so, there's just going to be a shortage. You see, if you look at the tequila prices, they've gone up and down for decades now. In 2016, a kilo of agave was 7 pesos. Right now, a kilo of agave is 33 pesos. So just to kind of show you the amount of inflation that crop kind of goes through. Right now, there's no mystery that tequila is growing at a rate we've never really seen any spirit kind of go through. If you think about just the last 20 years, this spirit has gone from maybe 3 or 4 bottles on a shelf to a wall on a shelf in the liquor store, right? I mean, if you had gone to any, even craft liquor stores, you wouldn't be seeing what we see today, an amazing variety of agave distillates. And I can't really imagine or think of any other spirit that's gone through that drastic of a change. So when that happens, as great as it is for the tequila makers, it creates this, there's a limited amount of resources in order to do it, right? Now we are seeing with celebrity brands that are happening, and more tequila brands are coming out. In the last 4 years, there have been over 270 new registered brands of tequila. So, no one really was ready for that 7 years ago. Now, if we go back at the time, this is the 80s. Now, tequila was starting to catch a little bit of steam, nowhere near what it is now, but there was a shortage going on. Now, when there's a shortage, who does that benefit? It benefits the farmers, right? Because they basically get to set their price. If I have all the agave and I give you, hey, my price for agave is 26 pesos. Well, as a tequila maker, you can be like, well, I don't want to pay that. Well, guess what? You don't really have a choice because everybody else is either out or charging as much or more as I am. So in the 80s, 4 or 5 of the main tequila makers kind of came together and they're like, listen, either you drop your prices right now or we all pull our contracts. And they muscled a lot of the other agave farmers and put them out of business. We had always wanted to start making our own tequila, but we just didn't have a distillery to do it out of. And we didn't want to contract it to another distillery. So Bacardi at the time had a distillery called La Tequileña. Now, they had tried their efforts into making tequila. They tried making rum there. It really wasn't quite working out for them. So we were lucky enough to buy the distillery from them at the most perfect opportune time. So now we have agave and we have a distillery. Now we want to start making tequila, right? Except there's one small problem. None of those guys knew how to make tequila, right? These guys have been farming agave for over 140 years. No one taught them the art of making tequila, right? Cooking agave, fermenting, distilling, aging, and what a yeast strain does. All these elements that are pretty important in making tequila. So they tried asking their neighbors, right? They tried asking the tequila makers that were in the area. And like, hey, man, how do you guys make tequila? Well, that's like asking what your grandmother's secret tomato sauce recipe is, right? Like, you just don't share that information. That's been passed down for generations. You don't just give that away, right? You have to earn that. And not only that, at the time, there was a very, very, very strict line of you're either a tequila maker or an agave farmer, right? To be both was pretty frowned upon. Think about it. Your supplier has now become your competition, right? It's like, with liquor distribution. all our liquor distributors started a chain of liquor stores or a chain of restaurants, then your opposition is going to be, well, what are you doing here? What's going on? So everybody was, a lot of people were very against this move. So they set their sights to Europe. And that's where they really started talking to Irish whiskey makers, Scottish whiskey makers, French winemakers. And that's where they learned kind of all this, the tools they needed to start making their own distillate. And a lot of that, a lot of those tools are still used today. So, I mean, do you guys want to start with some little bit of Blanco? Well, is that okay, Jeremy?
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, let's start.
I like to ease in a little bit of tequila every now and then, at least just to start out, right? Everybody looks thirsty.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what this is a tasting after all. It's great to get information and education, but drinking and learning is always how I do.
Well, so we have our Blanco here. Our Blanco, as you can see in the little kind of brochure I sent for you guys. This is unaged. Now I believe it says, does it say rested? No, it doesn't say. Okay, good. So if you see it says stainless steel, minimum 6 months, that refers to just the resting period that it goes through. To make tequila, there's a lot of chemical and, just a lot of things going on, right? Cooking, fermenting, distilling. So the resting period is just to let everything settle down. So the Blanco, as we call it, the veins of your distillery. It's the roots. It's the beginning. If we put a lot of work into our Blanco, because if your Blanco is not, what it's supposed to be, then it doesn't really matter what kind of barrels or how long you age it for. Your Blanco is your starting point. I personally am a big fan of Blancos. I drink almost exclusive Blancos, at least to start the night, and then I like to work my way up. But on the nose, I get it's a little bit of minerality. I almost get a hint of sweetness to it, very subtle kind of cheese notes, if you will. And on the palate, it's mineral. It's a little grassy. I get a hint of cucumber, mint, just kind of nice little vegetal notes and it's really, really approachable, really easy drinking for a Blanco.
Make it pick in a draft. Results.
Blanco really smooth.
Really, yeah, definitely super smooth. There's like a creamy mouthfeel to it too that's really unique. I mean, there's in a lot of Blancos you just get some like cracked pepper notes or like really earthy flavors, but the elegance of this, like that nice roundedness, is really definitely one of the staples of the Don Fulano line. And just like you were saying, Sergio, you got to start with a good foundation. And this is a great, this is a great way to, it's a great evolution to see how the Reposado and Anejo are after this. But, when you're already starting with such a rich and full flavor in the Blanco, like just adding oak is going to, just elevate all that.
Yeah. So, yeah, no, absolutely. The Blanco elegant is definitely a word we like to use for our Blanco. And it really comes from a combination of our fermentation and our distillation methods. You see, if you look on the 10th page of your little booklet, there's a little bit of drawings of 5 different types of agave, and it's basically the aging of the agave. And us as Don Fulano, we only use Maduro and Pinto, which is the oldest and most mature and most ripe version of that agave, making sure that whatever agave we use is ready to be used in the tequila making process. So a big question we always get is, are you guys a highland or a lowland tequila? So that comparison was made early on in tequila as tequila got more and more popular. And for lack of a better term, we're trying to trick people into drinking it. It's kind of like a whiskey comparison, right? When you talk about Scotch, you have Highlands, Islay, Speyside. And this was a way to kind of make a parallel with that market in order to get more people into drinking tequila. So when you talk about highland and lowland, it refers to 2 things. It refers to your agave source and your water source. Now, we grow our agave in the Totonilco, which is in the highlands, but we make our tequila in the actual town of Tequila, It's about 3 hours away, which is considered the lowlands, but it's still 1,300 feet above sea level. So it's, it's not that low. Now, because we grow our agave in the highlands, but we could be considered a highland, but we use the water source from the town of Tequila, the volcanic spring water. You see, when you went to Tequila, Jeremy, how close were all the distilleries? They're like right next to each other, right?
Oh yeah, actually, let me pull up a picture for y'all real quick to show you how we got around, because they are super close to each other. But there's a very cool automobile that they send you in. Let me share screen. Oh, here we go. So yeah, this barrel on wheels is how they drove us around the town of Tequila. Basically this is how we got around to the different spots, and you'd only be in the car itself for like 2 minutes between each area you're going to. But this was the way we got around to start out with. And then I have some pictures of the distillery that Sergio was mentioning. So this is just kind of an outside view of it. I do apologize, these pictures aren't the best, but I was a little inebriated during this trip, so pictures weren't like my number one priority. But just general like outside, these are their stills that they have there. And yeah, let me see what else I got. This is, as you can see, the Don Fulano. This is the little different change in the bottling design that they've gone through since 2017. This was a really cool like outside bar where we just got to like sit or stand and try a bunch of different tequilas. And this individual right here in the middle, the nice smiling man, that is Sergio Fonseca. So he is the is it just him who's making the tequila now, or is Enrique still involved?
Oh no, Enrique is very much involved. Enrique is the heart and soul of the tequila making process. Sergio's definitely like the passion, the face of the brand, but the mad genius. They call Enrique Arc as an architect. So that should give you an idea of his role. He's very much the architect of Tequila Don Fulano. And Jeremy, dude, I think I was on that trip with you.
Oh, really?
I remember my friend Kate right there in the bottom, 2017. Yeah. So I've been running those trips since 2014, so I'm almost positive I was on that trip with you.
Oh, most likely then, yeah.
I feel like we should roll through some of those other photos and see what we find. See Sergio.
We're okay.
That's I don't think the statute of limitation is quite passed on that one, Kelly.
Yeah. But
actually, Jeremy, if you could scroll back a little bit to the picture of the stills, and show you kind of one more back. The one you had, I think you had one with two.
This one.
There you go. Yeah, that one. So if you look at the same page, if you have the little brochure under the pictures of drawings of all the agave, you have basically an inside photo of our oven. See, once we get our agave delivered from the highlands, we cook it in an oven called an autoclave. See, an autoclave is this big cylindrical stainless steel oven that's powered by a boiler and uses steam to slowly cook the agave. Now, a lot of brands use an autoclave. Do you have a picture of it?
I think so, yeah. Sorry, I should have stopped sharing screen.
You're at
sorry, proceed. I'll find it.
No worries. So we use an autoclave. Now, a lot of brands use an autoclave. The difference between us and other brands is that they'll when you want to, while cooking the agave, they'll do like a really, really high speed and high pressure and cook for about 4 to 5 hours. Now, what we do is we do very, very low pressure and almost like very little steam, and we cook it for about 32 to 48 hours. So the difference in that being is that it's a slow cooking process. When it comes to tequila making or cooking agave, the tools are important, but it's also how you use the tools, right? You can, just because you're grilling a steak, you can grill that steak the wrong way, right? The way you cook something will yield a different flavor than other methods of cooking. So after we cook our agave very, very slow, we use our milling system to basically extract all the juices, and then we ferment it. We're fermenting the aguamiel, the agave juice, and turning it basically into an agave beer. And we do that with a proprietary yeast strain, which is basically an accelerator to converting the sugars into the alcohol. Now, you saw in that picture that Jeremy had of our still. So we do two types of distillation for Don Fulano. We use a copper pot, which is those the big copper ones you saw. Can you pull that picture up, Jeremy? With
For sure, yeah.
Stills?
And I do have a picture of, it's not y'all's autoclave, it's from our Arete. I can show that as
Arete?
well in a little bit, yeah.
Sure.
Here is,
There you go.
so
those
these are the
our
stills
copper
that
pot
Sergio
stills.
was mentioning.
Yeah. So that's the copper pot. Can you go to the picture right before that one?
Yeah. Oh.
And that one all the way to the right, you can kind of see it's kind of has some scaffolding next to it, right next to the tank. Yeah, that's our continuous still, or a column coffee still. So we do roughly 80% copper pot to a 20% column coffee still. Now, the column coffee still is very rarely used to make tequila. It's very prominent in like Armagnac or even vodka. And when we bought the distillery, we inherited this still. And at the time, they had no one really used a column still to make tequila. So it took us a long time to kind of figure out how to work this thing. And ultimately, we figured out that we took a couple of the plates out, and it helped us yield a much more elegant and lighter tasting product that was a good counter to our kind of bold copper pot tequila. So we're one of the few, I don't know really any other brand that does kind of two types of distillation for one expression. And that goes for all of our expressions at Don Fulano. They're all starting about 80 to like a 20% distillation. And again, that kind of goes back to the European influence that we got when we bought the distillery. So as we get into the aging, I think it's time for a little Reposado. I believe it's Cynthia's favorite, right? I'm sure she's been waiting for this one. So
that 80-20 you're talking about, do you distill, like you take 80% out of one still and 20 out of the other, or do you move from one still to the other?
No, so the way we do it is actually through our blending process. And so everything we make is a blend of different batches. So now there's when making tequila, most people will do what's called a single cycle process, right? You cook agave, ferment, distill, bottle. So when we make tequila, once we're done distilling or aging, we put it to an inventory, and from that inventory is how we make each individual batch. See, every bottle of Don Fulano is a mixture of different batches. So this Blanco is a blend of 4 to 5 Blancos. And the way we do that is through a process called triangular tasting. And I'll explain that. So is that Francesca, you asked me that question, right?
Yes.
Awesome. So let's say you and I are working for Don Fulano, Francesca, and we're running low on Blanco, as I am right now, right? So we need to make a new batch of Blanco.
Gotcha, buddy.
There you go. All right. So we want to make a new batch of Blanco. So we know that to make Don Fulano Blanco, we're not even talking about age expressions yet. Don Fulano Blanco is roughly a blend of 80% copper pot tequila, 20% column coffee still tequila, 60% of the tequila was fermented, was called without bagazo, which is without fibers, 40% with. Okay, so we have these ingredients, right? And we make 2 new batches of Blanco that are basically a blend of the aforementioned ingredients. Now, the only problem is, or not problem, issue, is that the ingredients have been sitting for a long time. So flavors have changed, right? So you have to start adjusting the recipe. So we'll do a blind tasting, you and me, Francesca, and we'll such Don Fulano experts will know that the reference point is what we made before. Now you'll try the 2 new batches, and Francesca will be like, well, you know what? This new batch is a bit too sweet and it lacks minerality. So, okay, you'll tell our distiller Enrique, and he'll be like, okay, cool. let's add minerality to it. So we'll go to our inventory, which is very carefully monitored, and there's a lot of kind of notes we take on flavor profiles, and we'll add. And Enrique will be like, okay, you know what? When Jeremy came in 2017, we were making a really mineral tequila because of heavy rainfall. So we'll add a little bit of that tequila to the new batch, blend it again, and do another tasting. And we'll keep that process going until we no longer know which one the reference point is. So it's the same like cooking, right? When you're cooking kind of when you're cooking a meal, you might have a recipe in mind, but you're always tasting along the way because ingredients are changing, right? You need to check for salt, check for pepper. It's the same thing with tequila. You got to check for balance, check for salinity, check for ethanol levels, and all these things are accounted for into making Don Fulano. Does that answer your question, Francesca?
Yes, thank you. That was interesting.
Awesome. So now imagine trying to start with, age expressions. So as we have Reposado in front of us, Reposado starts anywhere between 8 and 11 months in French limousine barrels. Don Fulano, we only use used French wine barrels, either limousine or Nevers. Now, there's nothing wrong with American oak, which is what 99.9% of tequila brands use. We just found that French oak gave us a more agave forward flavor and less kind of sweet butterscotchy, which is what we were getting from American oak. So we found this Reposado, as you taste it, just has a little bit more of that baking spices flavor. I get cardamom, I get a hint of cinnamon and very subtle notes of vanilla and oak, right? Not too overpowering, just very, very light. And obviously, I mean, this is one of the most balanced reposados I think there are. I saw someone ask, are all tequilas blended? In a way, yes, they are. Most tequilas are blended more out of necessity, because if you're running short on Reposado, you can blend some Blanco with a Reposado just to make for if you're running short on a batch. But we're one of the few brands that we do it because we want to ensure that every single batch we make is to our standards. But it's still subjective. It's still very much up to a human palate. It's still us just tasting. We're not, there's like, no, it's scientific in a way, but it's also, just 4 or 5 guys tasting tequila, hoping that we're getting, we're sticking to what, fans of Don Fulano are used to. So when it comes to age expressions, we'll start between 8 and 11 months. And then again, me and Francesca will try the 3 batches, and we'll go through that process again. And then either myself or Francesca can try this 8-month tequila, and it's lacking a certain flavor profile, and we can add up to 2 to 3 year tequila to Reposado to get to the point we want to get to. You see, when you blend aged expressions, you have to label it its youngest expression. So if I have a bottle that's 90% Anejo and 10% Reposado, you have to label it Reposado.
Nice, yeah.
What do you guys think of the Reposado?
Yeah, I love the spice note that you get up front. You get that really like fresh agave flavor. Then all that creamy richness comes back to it. Like you were saying, definitely get that cinnamon pop in there. Little butterscotchy to me, like you get that little bit of like kind of coating on the mouthfeel. But another thing I love about Don Fulano is that you still get to taste the agave. Sometimes producers, once you get into anything that's aged, depending on the oak they use, depending on sometimes people add things, you lose the agave flavor. Use that cracked pepper, use that freshness. But with the Don Fulano line, that's not the case. You always get that, and like even though there's a lot of creamy richness to this one, you still get that nice peppery note throughout.
Absolutely, yeah. And you said like it's very, very, very subtle in flavors, right? There's no one kind of aggressive flavor that kind of comes out. It's kind of like a blend of different flavors, and every time you taste it, you get something a little different. Every time I have the Reposado, I taste something different.
For sure, yeah. And so I do want to, I do have a picture, like I said, I do have a picture of an autoclave I'd like to show y'all since we were mentioning it. This is Aretes. This is not Don Fulano's, just so you know. But again, this is, these are almost right across the street or pretty close to each other. But I believe the Don Fulano ones are a little bigger, right? Like Sergio?
Oh,
Because
yeah.
yeah, because the Arete ones are big, but like I remember I walked into a Don Fulano one and it just felt like going through like the tunnels in DC when you're going down to the metro. Just like these big wide sections and just but yeah, this is what the autoclave looks like. I believe I have another picture right here of this is what it looks like inside with the piñas, which are the heart of the agave, after
Yeah.
they've been roasted. So yeah,
That's a brick oven.
oh, that's
That's
a brick oven. Okay.
oven.
All right. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a brick oven. So when making tequila, the three most popular types of ovens are autoclave, brick, or a stone oven. And
Okay,
those
yeah.
I
So this is
believe
the
that's
brick,
that,
yeah.
that Fortaleza?
I believe so. Yes.
Yeah. So the reason all the distilleries are so close to each other is if you actually look on a map of tequila and you kind of see where all the distilleries are located, they're all in this kind of like straight line. And the reason that being is they're all using the same volcanic spring water source. And that's what kind of gives a lot of the kind of minerality to lowland or valley tequilas, whereas highland tequilas use a welling source. Now, again, nothing wrong with that, but it's just different flavor profiles that brings to your tequila. So finally, we have our añejo. Now, our añejo starts at 30 months. And again, through that same blending process and tasting process, we'll add up to 4 to 5 year tequila to this.
And 30 months is pretty long for añejo. I mean, you guys, that's only 6 months shorter than what would be considered what you can then classify as an extra añejo, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So just to give you the CRT is the Consejo Regulador de Tequila. It's a kind of a organization that regulates tequila making in Mexico. It's, believe it or not, tequila is one of the most regulated spirits in the world, far more than rum, vodka. I would say maybe whiskey is comparable, but if you want to taste your own tequila in a barrel, you have to get someone from the CRT to unseal your barrel so you can taste your own product, just to kind of give you an idea. So when it comes to aging, your Blanco can be aged up to 60 days max, and 60 days to a year is a Reposado, and a year to 3 years is an Añejo. And then anything over 3 years is labeled as an extra Añejo, just to kind of give you the basic aging range.
And
Now,
a funny story about
Añejo-
the CRT,
Yeah,
or the regulatory rules of tequila. So one of the side projects that Sergio and Enrique do is Fuente Seca tequila, which are like these really elegant. I mean, these are elegant. Don Fulano's great, but like these are like another step up above that. And it's crazy because what they'll do is will take barrels from different distilleries and move them around depending on what kind of temperature or what kind of like seeping into the oak and everything that they wanted to do. So there's a lot more science to it. But that means that they have to have people come out from the regulatory groups to the distilleries, to the aging facilities, and then watch them transfer these barrels to the new facility and put them in, and then make sure they're locked and keyed again. And that's just an extra level. It's just that weird kind of scientist mind. I remember when I talked to Sergio about that, he was like, it's funny that you bring that up. Like out of everything that, like, for me, it was like the aging process of like, you're taking stuff from one spot to another, but then also having to have like official government cats just there making notes and making sure each barrel is counted for from one spot to another. And it's just like, just because you think that, oh, since it's a little colder now, let's move these up to a little higher elevation so they still get some warmth instead of being cold down here. And just those little touches, like those little things that you see from Don Fulano that like really, or Don Fulano, but the Fonseca family, that really, make them unique.
Yeah, Fonseca is very much kind of a student of the aging tequila game. Before he came along, no one was really aging tequila past 2 years, and just because it was just deemed unnecessary. And he was one of the first kind of pioneers to really like, well, let's keep it in the barrel. Let's see where this goes. And he's if you look at the last page on your booklet, you have a picture of our barrel room. That's just a quarter. I mean, that barrel room is in the Highlands, and it's the size of a football field, and it's 7 or 8 barrels high, and that's just one of 3 barrel rooms that we have in Mexico. So he's always looking for barrels. We have Calvados barrels, we have Chardonnay, Cabernet. He just loves mixing. Yeah, so that's in tequila, right
Yeah.
there.
I don't know how many of y'all have been in barrel rooms, but this is one of the biggest things I miss of the last 2 years is going to a distillery and just smelling all that like oak and seeping and like just the different characteristics that come out of it. Like that wet woody smell, I just miss it so much, and I just can't wait to get back to a distillery for
You and me both, brother.
that. Nice.
So what I like about this añejo is it's a little different than añejos I've had in the past, just because I don't really get a lot of that kind of. I personally don't get a whole lot of like kind of butterscotch and vanilla. I get a lot of almost like kind of cooked banana and dried apricot, if you will. And it's again, I think the French oak is very much. You can really kind of tell how the French oak affects. If you try this side by side with like an American oak aged tequila, you can kind of get how the spice and the sweetness is a little different than you would from an American oak. And this is why I find this añejo super special.
Yeah, I think one of the things you pick up a lot in American oak compared to what Don Fulano uses is those spice characteristics. You get a lot more of that woodsy kind of aspect, and especially if they're using, that's new American oak. If they use bourbon barrels, you're definitely getting more of those caramel, butterscotch kind of flavors. And I mean, most people, I would think a lot are using more of use bourbon barrels, because with those you can only use them once, and then you got to get rid of them somehow. So selling them to different people, especially Scotch, tequila, Japanese whiskeys as well. Good way to do it. But yeah, you definitely pick up more of those kind of sweeter butterscotchy caramel flavors that Sergio was mentioning from the American oak than you would from the French limousine.
Oh, 100%.
Okay, this is a good question from Cynthia. How are large conglomerates affecting tequila?
Oh, that's the $1 million question, huh? So I will say, here's my piece on that. Now, it's bringing a light to the agave and tequila making companies more than ever. Right now, to be in the tequila game is super competitive. It's not quite saturated, but it's definitely getting there. The biggest thing right now is the availability of mature agave. You see, the biggest a big issue that's happening in the tequila making industry is really there's just no agave or mature agave to be bought. And not only that, if Cynthia wanted to make her tequila, right, she talks to a farmer and she reserves, a certain portion of land. She's like, okay, once this field hits 7 or 8 years, I'll buy all your agave. When another company can come up to that same farm, like, well, I'll buy it now and I'll pay 3 times the price. So that's a big kind of issue with the big companies. And, it's definitely an uphill battle to educate people to, try the craft products, because, craft spirits take more time and they're just more expensive for the little guys to make. So our price points are not exactly competitive, but it's through things like this, right? To talk to people and educate one-on-one and really just get them to just for lack of a better word, give it a shot, right? give the small brands a shot. So like, I think it's good and bad, right? Because there's a spotlight on agave spirits, and it's kind of passing over to mezcal and bacanora, sotol, all these other agave spirits. It's definitely making it a little bit more challenging for the smaller companies to make the product they want to make without having to cut those corners. So that's my piece on that.
And luckily, as you said, it's about talking to the right people. And all of you, since you support a small crafty store that has focused on a lot of this stuff for the last 27 years now, you know, you folks are some of the better what's looking for candidates for people to go out there and talk to your friends about this kind of stuff, because you understand it. You know, this is something, if you shop at the wine country, there's definitely some smaller crafty stuff that y'all have enjoyed, hopefully, and that you've opened up to your friends. And then, you know, this is just one of those things you can do as well, where, you know, yeah, it's cool to have a celebrity, you know, sponsor or a celebrity face to something, but not always mean it's great stuff, you know. Where something like this, where it's a small family who's been working this for, as the bottle says, 5 generations. You know, these folks have practiced it, they've lived it, they've done it, so they know what's going on a little bit more. They understand the artisanship behind something like this, because yeah, I mean, as Sergio was saying earlier, you got a minimum of 7 years before these things are even mature and ready to go. So you need to learn patience, and you need to have that patience, and that's not something that you can just be. People with money who are ready to do things don't understand that. Where, you know, a small town farmer, small town kid could, you know, understand that, because that's what they've been doing for the whole life. Oh, so Cynthia asked, how is mezcal different from tequila? So mainly it is the agave that is used that is the biggest difference. So as Sergio was saying earlier, Blue Web is the one agave that you can use in tequila. That is the base. You know, everything starts with Blue Weber and then goes from there. But mezcal, or with wild agave mezcal, there are over 200 species of agave. There's probably about, I'd say, Sergio, you can definitely tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I'd say there's about like 8 to 10 that are used more regularly. Espadín being the biggest one, of course, since it is similar to Blue Weber in the fact that it's a little easier to cultivate, a little easier it has a shorter growing or maturity span. But you know, as Sergio was saying, there's like Bacanora, the Satol, all these other regions that use different agave plants, different varieties of agave to make their spirit. And then it's also the style of cooking. So with agave, or sorry, with tequila, it is either the autoclave or the brick oven, or sorry, the 3. So it's autoclave, brick oven, and what was the third one, Sergio? Stone, yes. And then that is, so you're cooking it in those styles. Where with mezcal or wild agave, you're typically digging a pit and then smoking these piñas. So you're getting a lot more of that smokier kind of flavor to it, which is why a lot of people are like, oh, like mezcal is kind of like Scotch, but from Mexico. And it's like, not exactly. There's, you know, some other differences as well, but there's definitely a smokiness to it. The more that people are getting into mezcal, because I've been a very big agave geek since about 2014, 15. But now people are starting to realize that if a mezcal is like super smoky, super aggressive, they're kind of trying to hide some stuff that, you know, might not be great with the agave plant itself. Because just like Blue Weber, that has this really nice, like fresh cracked pepper note, this really nice liveliness to it. Each agave has its own flavor. There's some that have these like really big citrusy flavors. You get like lime zest and lemon peel, or you get some softer stone fruit too. I mean, there's some like really distinct flavors in different agaves. And very much like how Sergio was mentioning how earlier, it all depends on where it's grown, how it's grown, what animals interact with it, and all that. Same thing. And a lot of these agaves are wildly grown. They're not cultivated because they don't grow in that sense. They don't like it. They're, you know, the wild stallion that needs to keep running on its own. And then it will let you know when it's mature and you can come get it. But yeah, that's some of the general differences between mezcal and tequila.
Yeah, I like to use the 3 Ps: the plant, the process, and the place.
See?
So
It's even better.
yeah. So the plant, as Jeremy was talking about, is, you know, tequila's Blue Web, mezcal is not only any agave you want, but you can blend different types of agave as well. The process refers to the cooking, again, the ovens and the pit, and then the place refers to the specific regions that you can make tequila. There's one of 5 regions in Mexico you can make tequila, and one of 8 regions in Mexico you can make mezcal. So 3 Ps is the easiest way to remember that. Someone else asked about the agave one-time plant, the root sprout again. That's a great question about how. So agave reproduces 2 ways. So one way, as agave kind of starts to mature, it actually grows mini agaves, what's called hijuelos. you'll see as agave hits a certain age range, you start to see tiny little agaves, these little kids kind of sprout right next to it. Now you can dig those up and replant them, and boom, you have more agave. Or in some situations, you have what's called a uh, I'm blanking on the name right now. It'll sprout a long branch in the middle, and in that branch of the agave, there's little seeds, and certain birds or animals will try to feed off those seeds and fall, and because of that, they'll fall off, and then just through natural process, they'll start to grow another agave. So those are the two ways that agave reproduces. Now, when it comes to reusing the field, you have to let the earth rest. Agave really takes a toll on, or so the earth where the agave is grown really takes a toll when once the agave is done. I mean, the nutrients of the soil, it takes a lot to fully mature agave. Agave takes energy from any source that it can get it. So we do a process what's called milpa. It's a very ancient way of basically letting the earth rest, which is we do a crop rotation. So once we've harvested a whole field of agave, we'll grow 2 other crops, so whether it be just corn or sugar, something easy for the soil to replenish its nutrients and then replant. So that's not a common practice because, again, we need agave and we need it now. But because we like to take our time and make sure that the soil is ready to be used into growing agave, we want to make sure that we can do the best we can to just help recycle that soil.
And then, yeah, speaking to that maturity, I'm blanking as well as the name of like the sprouting part of it. But if you live, I mean, all of us live in Southern California because you shop at our store. I'm sure that if you take a walk around and you see some agave plants, you'll see a couple that have this really random sprout. Like on my morning walks, that I take in downtown Long Beach, I see them all over the place. And those are like fully mature agave where there's times I'm like, well, if I could just go around at night and pick up some of these, I wonder if I could harvest enough of these like random agave. Like I don't even know what some of them are. But yeah, it's like, can I harvest enough of these and go find someone to make this for me? But a lot of this is on public land, so it might be a little tricky with Long Beach city.
So tequila is only made in Mexico? Is that
Yes.
that's what you said earlier? Is it like champagne in France? Is it made anywhere else and called something different, like sparkling wine?
Absolutely. Actually, several South American countries, and I believe in Asia too, you can make an agave distillate. You just can't call it tequila.
Okay.
Exactly.
There's a brand that I can think of right now. It's called Acara, Aqara. It's a Peruvian agave distillate.
Yeah, we carry
Now,
that.
So you carry that?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Nice. So yeah, I believe. I think from what I've heard, there's a couple spots in Japan that are trying to make an agave distillate. See, agave grows anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Agave can grow literally almost anywhere in the world. That's going to grow very, very differently. But agave is one of those plants, again, that just sees the environment that's in and then adjusts and adapts.
Sure.
So,
and yeah, I actually have
you
a
can
friend.
make tequila, you just can't call it tequila.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm gonna let you all in on a little like private secret of myself. One of my very good friends, one of my best friends, she and her partner just bought a bunch of land in Arizona. And I'm talking to her about figuring out some ways to grow agave on her land and then seeing what we can do with it in 6 to 7 years, 7, 8 years. Because she's not too far from a distillery either in Arizona. So I'm like, oh, maybe we can just call them up and be like, hey guys, you want to try something new? I mean, right now it's a bunch of jokes between the two of us, but we're both the type who in like 5 years I'll be calling her and be like, how's it looking? How's everything growing? What do you have there, Colleen?
Okay, so we have El Ladrón. It's a tequila. I mean, not a tequila. It's a blue agave spirit from Santa Cruz Distillery. So El Ladrón means the thief.
I'm gonna look into that.
Who's the tequila one in this group?
Yeah, it's a good one.
Is it any good, Colleen?
I like it.
Any good?
We haven't tried it yet. We were anxious to start, so we had a little before we started tasting it. Right?
Nice, right on. Yeah, it's always good to get a little,
It's
a little
Friday.
jump start on
It's
the palate.
okay. It's Friday.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely.
You want that palate to be
Yeah.
woken up, for the tasting. You don't want it to start out like
Exactly.
soft.
It's
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
it's like
That's what we
stretching.
were doing.
It's warming up. You're like stretching. You want to pull a muscle.
Exactly.
Oh, we had a question earlier when you
A
were
serious question.
when you were showing the picture inside with all the you get the
Piñas.
piñas,
oven.
yeah, the oven.
Yes.
So when we were looking at that picture, how much tequila will come out of there?
Oh, that's a good question.
That's a great question. Well, it depends on what tequila we're making, right? If we're making a Blanco tequila, we're always going to yield a lot more than if we're making a Reposado. You
Yep.
see, when you age tequila, you lose a lot of it to what's called the angel share, right? You lose a lot of kind of the spirit because the wood absorbs it. So I mean, it's hard to tell because every time we only produce really 2 to 3 times a year, and we'll make anywhere between probably like 2 to 5,000 up to 10,000 liters at a time. Each piña will lend usually anywhere between 7 to 8 liters of Blanco tequila.
Oh,
So
wow.
that's, I mean, if that helps at all,
Yeah.
somewhere around there.
Okay.
Great, thank you.
That at least explains why I can actually afford tequila.
Nice. All right, so Cynthia. Okay, so you had the Reposado before, but now the Anejo is your favorite, huh? Okay, nice. Right on.
Wow.
Yeah. So, what does
Alright.
everybody else think? Like, yeah, we've had the three.
Ah,
Kelly just pulled out a nice special one that is not being
big
shown
guns.
tonight. But yeah, there are two other. I think it's just the two SKUs, right? It'd be the overproof Blanco and then the extra Anejo that Kelly just showed, right, Sergio?
Still strength and
Still
our
strength.
Imperial.
Yeah. So the still strength Blanco that Don Fulano makes is also carried at the store. That is very dangerous in a great, beautiful way. Because as creamy and rich and easy as their Blanco is, even a still strength version of that is still delicious and hides its overproof or higher proof very well.
Too well.
Yeah.
well.
I mean, great on its own, but fantastic in a cocktail because it keeps that higher proof with it too. So it's awesome. And then the extra Anejo, which Kelly was just showing off, the very pretty blue bottle. Yeah. So that would be the extra 6+ months in oak that one has. And I mean, if you love the creamy richness and approachability of the Anejo, that extra Anejo is just just throw that over some vanilla ice cream and enjoy yourself a night.
Whoa.
Yeah, so the Imperial, so the still strength is not only the highest proof, but it's the only one that's only made with copper pot.
Oh, okay.
So if you ever have some Blanco left, you want to try them side by side and kind of see what kind of both distillation methods kind of bring to the equation. That's a great exercise. Our Don Fulano Imperial. So what did we say? We say extra añejo is 3-year minimum, right? So anything above 3 years. Now, a lot of brands will hit maybe 3, maybe 3.5, maybe dabble with 4. We start this at 5 years. Now, through this blending process, we'll blend with tequilas up to 18. That's an old bottle. Yeah. Up to 15, 16, even 17-year tequila in that. And even after all that aging, we do what's called a sherry finish, where we put all that tequila and we put in a sherry cask, an Oloroso sherry cask, for about 2 to 3 months. A very unique product in the market for sure. Very few brands have, really, not because they don't want to, but it's just, it takes a long time to make that bottle.
And funny story about the extra añejo. So when I was during this trip, after I took this picture and sipped what's on the left-hand side in this glass, they were like, "Oh yeah, we have bottles available to purchase here." I'm like, "Oh sweet, like how much is this one?" And I forget exactly what the price was, but I was like, in my mind, I was like, oh, pesos, no problem. And they're like, oh no, it's still American dollars. I was like, oh, well, I really like the reposado, so I'll just go with that. Thank you, guys. But no, this is
Great
the
reposado.
Imperial's phenomenal. I'll talk to my wine warehouse people after, but I think we might be able to get some of this. So leading into that, as some of you who are regulars from our old days of the pre-Zoom tastings, when we got to do these in person, we used to give 10% off bottles purchased for the night. I will continue that as I have for a couple of these spirit tastings. So if y'all come in and you buy yourself a 750 of Don Fulano, whether it's the Blanco, the still strength Blanco, the Reposado and Anejo, again, I'll try to talk to some of my good people over there at the Warehouse of Wine to see if we can get some extra Anejo in as well. But yeah, y'all will be given 10% off on that. I'm not there 2 days a week. If I'm not there that day, just like, well, Jeremy said, and no,
Jeremy said, blame it on Jeremy.
exactly, yeah.
Jeremy
blame it on
said,
me,
that's the
everyone
code.
blame.
That's the code, everybody. Jeremy said, whatever you guys
Jeremy
want.
said 50% off.
Then it must be true.
Well, see, it's recorded, so they'll see it's 10%. But I like the play. That's a good one.
Can I ask a question about the name? I love the name. As a Spanish speaker,
Sure.
Don Fulano is that's just so wonderfully articulate. It's because mostly tequilas and fine wines are always named after the family name and the estate and the noble sentiment of someone's last name. But Don Fulano is just hilarious, and yet this is amazingly good tequila.
Explain.
Honestly, you nailed it, Cecilia. That's exactly our intention. At the time when we started the brand, but when they started the brand, there was all these Don Abraham, Don Julio, Don Augusto, all these. So actually Sergio's dad was like, man, Don Fulano. So Fulano, for the Spanish, Fulano is a term in Mexican Spanish that refers to basically a nobody, a man of mystery, a charlatan, if you will, just kind of like somebody whose identity is somewhat unknown, where
love it.
Don is the opposite of that, right? It's a person of respect, a person of high class, of known identity throughout the town. So this is kind of a play on words, but also just kind of poking a little bit of fun to our next door tequila making neighbors, if you will.
I love it.
Very
Well,
Very much,
speaking
just
of
kind of-
names,
Yeah.
is Fonseca any relationship to the Fonsecas of Portugal?
Probably. They emigrated from Portugal. So it's very much a possibility.
Wow.
So they emigrated from Portugal in 1870s, I want to say. So, I mean, it's very likely. I've actually never asked that question. I'll be sure to inquire next time I talk to Sergio, but it wouldn't surprise me. It's I guess it's a medium common name, but I mean, it's pretty likely.
That would be an interesting thing if they were related to the Fonsecas who make the port.
Yeah. Dominating from both sides of the world,
Right? Got their hands in everything these days.
Yeah.
Do you carry the Fonseca line, Jeremy?
Not at the moment. No, that's actually one of my journeys of when I started back at the store last year was building up the clientele again, because last time I was the buyer at the wine country, we had a whole lot of tequila. It all kind of got downsized during my
Departure.
my growing period, I guess we'll call it that.
Sure.
And so that's part of the goal. And now, I mean, now that we have the clientele for that kind of stuff, I definitely want to bring some more back in, because again, like all the stuff that this family makes is great. Everything that Enrique and Sergio have their hands on is phenomenal, but that Fonseca stuff is just a completely different ball game. Sorry, I just started thinking about some the 12-year-old. Yeah, that stuff is delicious. but so are these. And so I'm super glad that y'all came in, hung out with us tonight and drank some Don Fulano. I hope y'all found some new tequila that you really enjoy. Again, y'all get 10% off for being such great supporters of the wine country. We thank you so much for that. We are a small family business and we love supporting any other small family businesses. We got another question. Are there terroir differences? I think you kind of get into this earlier, Sergio, with the highland versus lowland, but I mean, there's definitely I've noticed it in different agaves where you get that wild agave where you definitely taste a little bit more salty minerality depending on where it's grown. Again, that's part of the water source as well, right?
100%. I mean, agave grows. The biggest reason why we do this blending process is because, I mean, not even different terroirs. We can talk about agaves that are within 100 feet from each other. Each agave it's very individual, very temperamental, if you will. It just has these such rich properties that terroir is definitely makes difference. But there's so much that goes into how an agave. If your land is just slightly tilted and you got some agave that's facing a certain direction, that's going to grow much differently than agave that's flat. So agave is such a complex. I've been meaning to talk to like a biology expert or a botanist just a little bit on the subject, but yeah, everything very much terroir is a big deal. If you look at kind of the soil between the highland and the valley of tequila, the soil in the highland is bright red and almost kind of like a clay tennis court, like that color, where in the valley it's more kind of dirt, that dark brown color. So all of these, there's all these different things that affect the tequila, and it rains at different time of year than it does in the highlands and it does in the valley. In fact, I believe average harvest time for a single field will go anywhere between like 5 to 6 months, meaning it'll take, once the agave is fully mature, it'll take it between like 5 to 6 months to fully harvest the agave, where in the valley it'll take about 1.5 years to fully harvest the field.
And yeah, different temperatures, I imagine too, right? Those different elevations, you get in different, different times of year. It's a little cooler
Quality's
somewhere.
Different. Oh yeah,
For sure.
different. Yeah, air quality is different. The amount of rain you get is different. The amount of wildlife is different, and yeah, everything affects the growth and the yield of sugars that agave is gonna give you.
Yeah. Awesome, y'all. Well, I mean, we've enjoyed the 3 tequilas we have in front of us. Feel free to enjoy more. You bought the bottles. You can do whatever you'd like with them. But before we start wrapping up, does anybody have any more questions? Love the questions, by the way. Love the comments. These are all about being interactive, and I love it. So thank you guys for this.
Jeremy,
Wanted to say that we enjoyed all of them. Probably the Anejo, Michael, and Reposado, Rodi.
Okay, awesome.
Okay, awesome.
Great stuff, Sergio. Thanks.
Cheers, guys. No, my pleasure. This is awesome.
thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you very much.
If any of you guys are ever in Mexico in tequila, shoot me an email and we're happy to give you guys a tour.
Oh,
Yeah.
really? That would be awesome.
You just
Thank
give
you
us
so much,
give us a
Sergio.
heads up.
Yeah.
Thank
No
you so
problem.
much, Sergio, for hopping on, and thank you so much, Wine
Thank
Country and Jeremy, for
you.
featuring Don Fulano. We really appreciate it.
Yeah. All right, we do have another question.
Cheers, guys.
How about difference between natural cork stoppers and synthetic?
Ooh.
I mean, I know this from the wine world. It's more about the synthetic is better. Synthetic is better if you don't want to worry about the fear of the corkage. So of a tree being of the cork itself being a little defunct, thus making whatever is in the bottle defunct as well. If you ever had a corked wine, and there's a lot of wet cardboard flavor to it, wet cardboard taste to it. I don't know. I mean, I have seen some spirits before that I've been like, this kind of tastes a little corked, but I've also been told that that's not a real thing. So I've had arguments about this because I'm like, this tastes corked, but I don't. Sergio, you're the professional on this one.
I mean, yeah. So I worked with Fortaleza for a long time, and for those of you who don't know, Fortaleza only uses real cork, and we stopped using real corks in like the mid 2000s, about 2007 or 8 for Don Fulano. So I've heard that that people tell me that tequila tastes corked. I personally don't get that, but yeah, I don't. It's different. What spirits don't really change very much after a year or so after they've been bottled. It just doesn't really work like that with spirits, where like the way wine does, where it'll keep changing as it goes. But because of our blending process, if you try your tequila now, then and then a year later, it'll taste a little bit different. But after that, there's not like any harsh differences with the spirit. How great are those little bottles, by the way? Those bottles are awesome.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Awesome,
we
everybody.
fill those out by hand, by the way. So I hope you guys appreciate this. We still haven't figured out a machine to fill those up, which is why we only have a limited amount. So
That's
yeah,
a persistent eye, though. Whoever does that, like that's a good eye on them to be like, now, like because that's a quick fill.
That's a job I do not want to do. I'll tell you that right now.
Awesome. Well, again, everybody, thank you so much for hanging out with me on a Friday night. Sergio, thank you for coming in and giving us some better education on this. Hope you all enjoy your Friday. Hope you all enjoy this weekend. For you who have Monday off, enjoy it a little bit more on a Sunday. Don't forget, you can come in tomorrow, pick up a bottle, 10% off to enjoy that Sunday a little better. But yeah, keep an eye out. Soon I will be announcing our next tasting in March. And yeah, again, thank you all so much. I love doing these. I'm happy that you guys are coming to these. Have a great night. Enjoy your weekend.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Bravo, bravo.
Thank you.
Jeremy and Sergio, what's with the lime and salt and tequila?
All right, I might be getting in trouble for this. Salt and lime and tequila are for people who can't drink tequila and they need something to soften it up for them. And that's also when you're drinking bad tequila, in my opinion. Like if you're drinking something that you need a chaser for, don't drink it. You're supposed to be drinking things to enjoy them. If you're drinking something and you're going, oh God, this is bad, why are you doing it? Like we're not 19 anymore. When you're younger, that's the kind of stuff you do because hey, you find what you find. But we're all adults, we're all mature, we all make a little bit of money. So and buy stuff you like and then leave the lime and the salt to your margarita mix.
We're with you. Thank you.
Thank you.